Hi everyone. For everyone watching, I'm here with Dr. Jean and Bob Young, who serve with us in northern Ghana at Saboba Medical Center.
AG Hospital.
Oh, that's right. They changed the name a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's right. How long have you guys been there again? I forget.
Well, we first went to Ghana in July of 1988, and we've spent roughly 25 of the last 30 years there, but we've been in Saboba now a total of about 18 and a half years. 3.5 years the first time in the 90s, and then we came back, we served in some other places and then came back to Saboba in February of 2004, so we've been back there ever since.
Okay. So now you are a pediatric surgeon, right?
Right, general and pediatric surgeon, master's in public health from Tulane.
And Bob keeps that place functioning to some extent, right?
We have a better maintenance crew than we used to have, so I'm still involved when they need it, and I keep the house running.
Yeah.
Make sure she gets a good meal at the end of the day. Otherwise
I'd live on peanuts and water.
Yeah, and I followed you. You're when I was there last year about this time, and I was kind of astounded that you are on call 24/7, doing C-sections in the middle of the night every night, and so you're really the only surgeon there for.
I am the only surgeon. Now, my Ghanaian colleague, Dr. Samuel Sulemana, is a very capable young doctor who has had a fair amount of experience in some basic general surgery operations and also in things like C-sections and DNCs and so forth. So when both of us are around, then we do split call. Although if I'm still on in case there's anything really bad or anything really complicated, or in case we get a major trauma case that comes in.
Awesome. So tell me, I've been asking everybody a few simple questions. One of which, well, it may not be so simple, but what advice would you give a new missionary family heading out to the field to serve at a place like Saboba?
Well, I think number one, both husband and wife must have their own separate calls from God. When we first got married, I already had a missionary call, but Bob didn't, and he thought he was going to go on the coattails of my call. And I knew that this would be a terrible idea, and that sooner or later something bad would happen, and then I could get blamed. So he went on a short-term mission, and while he was gone, every morning I ran down the street to a Church of God, hit my knees, and begged the Lord to give him his own call. He got back into Memphis, got off the plane, hugged me, and said, "It's time to go to the mission field." And then he was in shock because he didn't expect to say that, but he did. God gave him his own call. I think cross-cultural adaptation training is very important. I think you need to look, first of all, you need to look at yourselves. Do you like being in different cultures? Do you enjoy different foods? How flexible are you? Because we've met people who went to the mission field, and in the case of one family, the wife was very adventurous. The husband, on the other hand, had very particular ideas about what kind of food he would eat and so forth. This is not a good setup. This is a situation where sooner or later, either you're going to become more flexible, or there's going to be a problem. I don't know, Bob?
I would agree. For myself and Jean, we enjoy trying something new as far as foods. If you don't try it, you can't say you don't like it. Now, there's a couple of things that I've had that I ate it, and it helped enter into the situation and open the doors, but I wouldn't go out and buy it or ask for it again unless they served it to me.
I think another thing is, before you go to the mission field, you must establish a habit of praying together. This is critically important, because if you don't have a basic foundation of praying together, and not only just praying together for devotions, but also praying together on important decisions. Give you our latest example. Bob is facing cataract surgery on this coming Monday, and the question was, should we have them do both eyes at once, or should we have them do one eye at a time? And we sat down in the doctor's office. I don't know what the doctor thought. And both of us prayed individually, and in each case, God gave us the same answer. So, I mean, you have to do this, because if you don't have that as a basis, it's your spiritual life. You can't organize your spiritual life once you get overseas.
Sure.
You have to have that basis before you go.
That's good.
I think also you have to have an agreement on why are you going. You need to. I mean, you've got to. This has got to come from God, obviously, but you have to. You have to have a common vision of why are we going. What do we think God is calling us to do, and so forth. Because otherwise, again, these can all be Satan. You get on the mission field, Satan's going to do everything he can to discourage you, to tear you apart, to destroy your marriage, and you really have to have some of these things agreed upon. It sounds a little funny, I guess, but also the things that marriage counselors always talk about. How are you going to handle money? How are you going to make decisions about money? How are you going to handle childcare? How are you going to make decisions about childcare? You can't anticipate everything, but you need an agreement about how are we going to reach these decisions. Because again, these are all major issues that will really tear people apart. We've seen it happen.
Your marriage has got to be a joint corporation, if you want to use that word.
Yeah.
You don't make a decision that's very radical or even something simple without consulting each other.
Sure.
Because otherwise somebody's going to be unhappy of what's taken place.
Another thing I think is if you have kids and you're thinking about you've got to think about how are we going to educate our kids. Now, of course, it's far easier than it used to be to do your homework. You can communicate with people who are already on that field or at least in that country and see what's working for them and so forth. Village schools, by and large, just won't cut it. So you're going to wind up having to do some combination of homeschooling or even perhaps missionary boarding school. And you've got to look, and you've got to also understand that a one-size-fits-all approach to the kids is not going to work. There's a really good book, I think it's about 20 or 30 years old, called Letters Never Sent. It was written by a lady whose parents were missionaries in Nigeria. And she had older siblings who had gone to, I think, Rift Valley Academy. Anyway, one of the schools, maybe it was Joss, and they loved it. Well, she wasn't that kind of a kid. And she was the one where the parents probably should have kept her at home and let her do homeschooling, but they didn't know this, they didn't think this. Another thing too, priorities, okay? You've got to God is not demanding that you make a human sacrifice of your spouse or of your children. And in the old days, there were mission groups that actually demanded that if you don't send your kid to boarding school, then you're just a missionary wimp and you're a failure and you've got to do this and this is our policy all the time. And unfortunately, because of that, there are a number of third culture kids who have since grown up with and who now hated the gospel just because they feel like they were made sacrifices. There was only one human sacrifice ever that God approved, and that was His only Son. Apart from that, no.
That's good. Let me ask you this: what you guys have been out there for a number of years, so you have probably more experience than a lot of folks I get a chance to talk to. What have been your greatest blessings on the mission field?
The people.
Yeah, people, the friends, other missionaries that we've met and have left a few, the people we've worked with. For example, we helped a young man, Gene had to amputate his lower leg, did a below knee amputation. We helped him get an education on and he was getting ready to set his Microsoft factory exams when he got malaria and died. And somebody asked me, well, you spent all this time and effort to educate him. I said, I'd do it again if I knew that was the end results, because it gave him a hope. His mother more or less disowned him, and we didn't find out until after he died that he had an extended family that just ignored the fact.
Well, the interesting thing about that particular situation, this guy's name was Musa, and he renamed himself Moses Blessing. But anyway, the thing was, when he went to senior secondary school, he got very involved in the Scripture Union group at his senior secondary school. I can't say he made really good grades, and this was bad. He was a bright guy. But he was also helping with a Sunday school class, and when he died and they had the funeral, they had, I don't know, what was it, 200 young people? I mean, a large
He touched
number
a lot of lives.
of young people whose lives he had touched, okay, and who filled the church, a large church, at the funeral. So, but you know, there's so many people that we've worked with who are our close personal friends, pastors, people we've helped through school. I mean, and you know, they're really as close as family, honestly. I mean, they are family, and we're just, you know, a little bit different color, but other than that, family. So I think that would be the biggest blessings. I don't know what else. I mean, to me, it always comes back to the people.
And just being in the country and seeing the various areas, the different cultures mixed, even in Saboba, the different cultures of the different tribal groups that are living in Saboba. And we don't always fit in, but we try. And again, with foods, if somebody offers you something and that means you're going to have a chance to fellowship or talk with them or opens a door, you eat what's put in front of you. Let God take care of it.
I think another thing too is worship. Okay, I always say that when I get to heaven, I want to sit in the Ghanaian section. Because Ghanaians do not sit there primly.
We dance.
They dance. What to me, the most fun is if the electricity goes off, so they can't use the keyboards and they can't use the horrible loudspeakers. And then the old people bring out their traditional drums and stuff, and then they start singing the songs that they learned when they first became Christians. And these
In
songs,
their heart language.
in the heart language, and these songs are wonderful. There's a song in the Gunja language that says that we used to worship trees and rocks, and now we worship the one true rock, Ebenezer. It's a great song. Anyway, and there are a lot of songs like that, and good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, you know, one of the things I noticed when I got to spend some time with you guys there at Saboba was you had a great respect for protocol, for you know, you obviously demonstrate and really have great respect for the tribal chief and the tribal hierarchy and system there. How important is that? Can you speak to that a little bit?
This is very important, and honestly, we learned this the hard way. All right, now the one thing that helped us was when we first went to Ghana, and we worked in Kumasi, which is more in the southern part of Ghana. One of the people who was teaching us the Tree language eventually became a chief in a small village. So he taught us the protocol for the Ashanti. If you were greeting an Ashanti chief, and it's actually a pretty rigorous protocol. So that helped. But one of the things we had to learn on our own when we got to the north was we had to learn how to relate not only to the local chiefs, but also to the regional director of health services and so forth. Because that particular thing, something happened and somebody didn't introduce us as fully as they should have. And we kind of had to play catch up. It took several months after we first reached Saboba in 1993 before I actually went in and greeted the regional director and so forth. And there are some things that are very important. You know, one of the problems is anymore Americans dress very informally. You know, it's very common in most churches for people to show up in jeans, and not necessarily the newest jeans. Ghanaians tend to dress up, and if you are meeting an important person, you really dress up. You make sure you're wearing leather shoes. You make sure you are wearing a nice dress, or, you know, nice trousers and a nice tunic if you're a lady.
Smock if you're a man.
A
I don't
smock
like ties, so I go for that.
Yeah, a nice traditional outfit. You might, these days it's a little, the protocol's a little looser. You might get by with a new pair of jeans that have been ironed, but you should have a decent shirt. You don't want to have a little old t-shirt with somebody's slogan and something on it. And I mean, it's just a sign of respect. And the problem is, if you're going to enter any culture, how can you enter the culture if you start by demonstrating disrespect for the culture?
It's tough.
It's tough. There are other things that have to go along with that. For example, in Ghana, you have to get, if you're a doctor, you need to get a temporary medical license. And unfortunately, the way they've handled the medical licenses, it's a little expensive, okay? Because of that, sometimes you have American doctors who say, well, you know, I'm already licensed in someplace else, blah, blah, blah. Well, in America, I've got a Mississippi license. If I go to Texas and I try and start practicing in Texas without getting a Texas license, I'm going to be in prison. This is nonsense. So why do they think that they can come to another country? The same kind of thing is true for nursing. And again, if you think you're going to do ministry, how can you do any kind of ministry when you're starting out by demonstrating a fundamental lack of respect for the authority structures in the country? You know, one of the things that we have to be very careful about, you know, First Samuel, the prophet Samuel talked to Saul about how obedience is better than sacrifice and rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. And unfortunately, Americans are very rebellious. There's a book called Living Overseas, written by a guy named Ted Ward. It came out in the 1980s, and he makes a good statement. He says, we are the people of 1776. You know, we idolize the Marlboro Man, the Lone Ranger. My gosh, nobody's going to tell us what to do. Well, that may work in the U.S. It does not work in Ghana.
Makes us a bull in the China shop sometimes and overseas.
It just totally destroys potential relationships. And so you have to be very, very careful about this. And one of the ways that you have to, this is a continual challenge. It's not just a one-time challenge. And even if you've been in a country a long time, you still have to go through and examine your motives and make sure that you're not reacting out of this. You don't get rid of your home culture because you go overseas, and you don't get rid of it even if you spend a long time in another country. It's still gonna, if you're not aware of it, and that's another thing. If you're going to go overseas, you need to look at what culture am I coming out of and what culture am I going into. I can't speak for the rest of Africa, but definitely in Ghana, the culture is one of consensus. People have traditionally lived in compound houses. They've lived very close together. So you have all these social things that you do to help grease social progress. So greetings are very important. Leave takings are important. If you're going to go someplace, you tell somebody, I'm going to the market, or I'm going here and I'll be back in a little bit. I mean, this is what greases the social things. And then you have to be very careful that you will not get one person in a group to stand up and just say, okay, I'm taking control of this group, blah, blah, blah. Even chiefs have their councils of elders, and it's a very poor chief who does not consult the elders and does not at least listen to them, and they may talk for a long time. They generally talk a lot longer than Americans have patience to listen.
Even as far as greetings, hi, how are you? And we jump right into the fact. To be really traditional or even social, you take time. How is the family? How and kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you start out, all right, so for example, good morning, good morning. How did you sleep? Oh, I slept very well. Fine. How is the family? How are your house people? How is your wife? How are the children? Oh, how is work? Oh, work is fine. You go through this whole thing. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, but this is just what people do. Now, you don't have to do it every single time, but a lot of times, and particularly if you're meeting somebody important, you want to make sure that you do a sufficient amount of the greeting that they're going to feel that you have time for them. And that's one of the things, it's one of the things that's good about Africa, but that you have to learn to take time for people and give them time and wait for them to answer, which is in many cases for Americans is very difficult. We just expect this answer right away. And meanwhile, culturally, the person may be waiting for you to ask something else, or maybe they be thinking about it. Anyway.
And
Even when you go into an office, and it could be any type of office, there's always somebody else. Greet them before, good morning, good afternoon, is the manager in, or whatever, but just don't blow by them.
One of the best pieces of advice we got given was given to us by Pastor Wally Cason. He and his wife used to be missionaries with South American Mission. He told this story about a fellow missionary. There was a government office, I think it was in Colombia, but anyway, his fellow missionary had been going in this office, and there was a security guy that sat at the door, and most of the time he greeted the security man. Well, this one day he was in a hurry and he was distracted, and he didn't greet the security man, and the next thing he knew, he was up against the wall, and the guy had a gun under his chin, and he said, "When you come in here, you greet me." And we thought, okay.
You learn from that very quickly.
Yes, we will do this. And actually, it was very good because when our first term, we got into the group that sent us in, and the national church misunderstood Bob's qualifications, and they were looking for certificates that didn't exist, and we wound up having to go back repeatedly to the immigrations office in Accra. And actually greeting the people at the door as we came into the office eventually allowed us to get bumped up, and they actually helped us because we kept doing that, and because we took a bottle of water and a book, and we sat there and we just waited. I got my medical license the first time. They told me, oh, the man who's supposed to sign this he's gone to the bank. So, okay, no problem. We sat down. 10 minutes later, I had my medical license. So that's another thing. Being patient pays off big dividends.
And as Americans, we sometimes forget that.
Yeah.
We struggle with that, don't we?
Yeah.
As a culture,
Yeah, and
and we have to learn to talk slower when we go back, because most Americans talk too fast for Ghanaians.
Well, the other problem too is, Ghana is a former British colony. So the English that is spoken is not American English. So you have to speak more slowly, enunciate more clearly, and if you can trill your R's a little bit, it really does help, because people, otherwise, people just won't hear what you're saying.
That's great. That's great advice, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to share a little bit. We really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you.
We thank you for having us share. I hope that what we've shared would help some young person that's considering missions, that they might learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should add that all this wonderful advice we've been giving did not necessarily come the first time around.
They came with social lumps.
Yes, that's right. It's entering a new culture is frequently like going across an unfamiliar living room in the dark. You keep stumbling over the footstools, you know. So,
That's awesome. Thank you guys for we appreciate it.
okay, thank you.